Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We're continuing our annual visit to county fairs around Oklahoma, and this week we're in Tulsa County, where the livestock show is underway.
The thing that drew me to 4-H is that I have been showing animals since I was 3 years old, and it's a family hobby that we do, and I really enjoy it, and so does my family.
We'll have more from the Tulsa County Fair a little later in the show, but first, a word from our extension veterinarian, Dr. Barry Whitworth, about preventing African swine fever.
African swine fever, it's a viral disease. There is no treatment, no vaccine. There's been no cases in the United States, but we're very concerned because it's in China, it's marching across Asia, it's been in Europe, and several countries in Africa. And the biggest problem is the survivability of the virus. It survives for long times in the environment. So they've proven it can survive in feed ingredients that come across from China or some other country all the way across the oceans. Typically when we think of pigs that get the disease, we're talking about not really specific clinical signs that point you to the direction of African swine fever. They're going to get a fever, obviously, lose appetite, you may see some bloody diarrhea, some blood discharge from the nose or eyes, get some red blotchy or black skin lesions is typically what you might see. You could have very high death loss with it. That may be the first clue that you're dealing with African swine fever. It's fairly contagious. The way I understand may not be something that just happens rapidly, which makes it difficult sometimes to diagnose or get a handle on that you're really dealing with African swine fever. You know, one of the things that we get this time of the year and the fairs start, you know, one of the things I tell people constantly, and I'm not the only veterinarian who says that, is if your animal is sick, do not take it to the show. That can become a very difficult decision to make, especially if you put a lot of time and effort. These 4-H'ers and FFA kids have really worked hard. But if the animal's sick, do not take it to the fair. The other thing is, follow good biosecurity practice once you're at the fair. You don't want to share any equipment with people that are there. You don't want to share feed troughs or feed buckets. Don't drink out of the same area that other animals are drinking. If you have any questions about African swine fever, contact your local veterinarian, or you may want to contact Dr. Rod Hall at the State Veterinarian's office.
Welcome to the weekly Mesonet weather report. I'm Wes Lee. Summer refuses to relinquish its hold on us this year, with temperatures and humidity levels both running above normal. It has been one of the most humid years to date that I can remember. This chart shows where the statewide average relative humidity should run in the blue fill area versus what we have actually encountered this year with the red line. Only 4 times this year have we dropped below the long-term average. These humidities, when coupled with our current high-pressure heat dome, are the reason we are still encountering heat index numbers in the hundreds. This map from September 3rd showed all but Cimarron County reaching into the high 90s and low 100s. It was similar to that for most of the week. Reasonably good shallow soil moisture is one of the reasons for the high humidity. This map shows the 4-inch fractional water index under sod on Tuesday. Green areas indicate moist conditions, which is good news for wheat farmers looking to get an early start on fall forage production. Unfortunately, when we look deeper into the soil, such as this map at 24 inches, we see the moisture playing out, especially in the west. This reinforces the need for our current drought declaration. Gary's up next with an August weather summary and the latest drought maps.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, August is in the books, and as usual, we had some good news and bad news. We had too much rain in some areas, too little in others. How did it impact the drought monitor? Let's take a look at the latest report and see what we have. The latest drought monitor report shows just about every area of drought in the state was reduced just a little bit. including that extreme drought area down in far southwestern Oklahoma, the red on the map. All of that is smaller, and central Oklahoma, which was seeing growing deficits, actually expanding quite rapidly, is almost completely drought-free now. So that's definitely good news. Now, we owe a lot of that drought reduction to the rainfall of August. If we took a look at the percent of normal rainfall map for August, we see, again, much of the area from the eastern panhandle through northeastern down through south central Oklahoma, much above normal rainfall. From 150 to even more than 400% in some areas. We see deficits from 75 to as little as 30% of normal. So that's the areas of drought that we've been talking about and are still suffering. Now let's take a look into the future. If we take a look at the September precipitation outlook, this is from the Climate Prediction Center, released on 31st of August. We see increased odds of above normal precipitation generally across the northwestern half of the state without covering too much of northeastern Oklahoma. So that's not greatly increased odds except down in the far western panhandle, but at least it's something in the area of above normal precipitation. We see drought persisting across southwestern over into south central Oklahoma and even up into the central parts of the state where that little bit of drought remains. Now over into the west, far southwestern part of the state, west of the area where it's persisting, we see some drought removal or improvement likely. So that would be good news for the far southwestern parts of the state where that drought is expected to be relieved. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. Kim, last week you said we'd seen wheat prices bottom out, but yet we saw another 13-cent drop this week. Tell us what happened.
Well, last week I was looking at the December contract. It was going on a sideways 10-cent, maybe 12-cent up and down range with the support at $4. That popped that $4 resistance point. Hammered it down 18 cents. I also said last week that I was concerned about the basis falling off. The basis actually increased a nickel. So I missed both of those last week, and the market took off about 13 cents of our cash price, but it was added back on at the end of the week.
Let's talk about some of the major market factors then that are impacting prices.
Well, the big thing's probably corn. People have been watching what's going on with the corn production. But something we haven't been paying much attention to or talking about is the value of the U.S. dollar. You go back to late June, early July, that dollar index was around 95.2. Last week it got above 99. That's a 4% increase on the Texas Gulf, or bring it back to Oklahoma. That's about 20 cents lower on our wheat prices because of the value of the dollar. 20 cents doesn't sound like much unless you're dealing with $3.60 to $3.65 wheat. Remember, you go back to the August was the market prior to the release had the corn production at 13.2 billion. USDA came in at 13.9 billion, and everybody went ballistic how wrong USDA was. Well, Allendale came out this week with a new projection for corn production at just under 3.8 billion bushels. And you go back to August to now, the market's been trading that USDA number, and looks like with the weather going the way it is, that number is going to be relatively close.
With all of this happening, what suggestions do you have for producers thinking about planting wheat for 2020 harvest?
I think the first thing on that 2020 harvest is the producers should plan on about $5 wheat prices. That's what's predicted for the next 10 years or so, is an average price of $5. I also think producers need to concentrate on producing a quality product.
Okay, great perspective, Kim. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
Wheat planting's on the mind of many Oklahomans, primarily for forage. And Brian, are there things that producers need to be doing as far as soil nutrition before they put the wheat in the ground?
Yeah, so a couple things come to my mind right now. Due to our heavy rains this spring and the things that happened in the port with the barges going down, we've had no movement going up and down the river. So there's a good chance early on this season on the early wheat planting that we're going to have a short supply of DAP. That is the primary phosphorus fertilizer we use in wheat production. It's 1846O. Just because the supply is going to be short until we open back up and open ports back up and get that moving. Now, the companies I've talked to have sourced MAP, that's 1152O. Now, that's a real good source of phosphorus all the same, but there's a few considerations as you think about it. So when we talk DAP versus MAP in a normal scenario, what you're getting is more phosphorus and less nitrogen when you move to that 1152 or the MAP product. So that means great, I put down 100 pounds of MAP and I'm getting more phosphorus, and I just have to account for the nitrogen with either my pre-plant or my top dress. Or I can lower my rate. If I have a goal rate of phosphorus, I can lower my product rate and get the same amount of phosphorus out with a little bit less product, which means I can run longer without filling the tanks.
Let's look at the overall nitrogen picture for forage production.
So pre-plant nitrogen is really important for forage production because we want that early growth so that we can get the graze off of it and we can get that forage production. However, as we look at it, much like in grain production, we're seeing the benefits of split application, especially if you look at last year. Think about all the rain we had after the wheat was planted and the anhydrous put on. So last year we did some studies and found out that split application of 120 pounds versus 120 pounds pre-plant always benefited us in total forage production and total protein as we go off on the end. So as typical, my recommendation would be look at wanting to produce about 1 ton of forage with your pre-plant. I want 50 to 60 pounds of nitrogen in the soil, whether that's residual or whether that's fertilized. Let's get enough down for at least 1 ton, a little bit over, with that pre-plant. And then let's look, see how the season goes. If we have good forage production, let's top it off with another 50 or 60 pounds if we're producing well. If we turn off dry and we have no production throughout the fall, then we can delay it into the spring. If we have a lot of rains, then we haven't lost that much and we come in as soon as it dries and top it off. But splitting out that application really gets us to put down the nitrogen when that plant needs it to produce the best forage quantity at the best forage quality.
And there's still plenty of time for the county educator to come out and work with you on your land with this.
Absolutely, still time to go out. If you're grain only, plenty of time to get your soil samples collected and getting them into the office. If you're putting out fertilizer right now, get a hold of your county educator, bring him out, and let's do some enriched strips. We can also do 0-in strips. We can back work that Green Seeker calculator on the website with the 0-in strip if you don't want to reduce your pre-plant, and we can still give you a recommendation on how well you're doing throughout the season.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Brian Arnall. And for more information about this and a link to his blog, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
It was a wet spring and summer across Oklahoma, leading to substantial growth of plants. Today, OSU fire meteorologist J.D. Carlson looks at ways to keep people and property safe as the growing season winds down.
Well, as you can see behind me, we've had quite a bit of vegetative growth because of the above normal rainfall that we've had this year across most of Oklahoma. In fact, I just checked last night, 4 of our 9 climatological districts were within the top 5 of their wettest growing season rainfall since 1921. So this has led to a lot of growth of vegetation, which will then serve as fuel later when this dies off for our upcoming wildfire season. Yeah, to help prepare for the upcoming wildfire season, as well as those who work with prescribed fire, we're going to offer a series of 4 workshops this fall on the OK Fire system, which is our weather-based decision support system for wildland fire managers. We have people that work with wildfires as well as prescribed fires that are welcome to come to these workshops. And they will offer 6 hours of training with an hour break for lunch. They are free. You have to register, however, and you can do that on the OK Fire website, or there's a link on the SUNUP site as well. So OK Fire is our weather-based decision support system. It's a program of the Oklahoma Mesonet. It's been operational since 2006. It uses the Oklahoma Mesonet to assess recent and current fire weather conditions and fire danger, and then uses an 84-hour forecast to predict the next 3 days of fire danger. So this is useful especially for those who deal with wildfire to anticipate fire danger in the upcoming 3 days. It's also useful for those who are currently working fires, suppressing fires, but it's also useful for those who do prescribed burning. It allows them to look ahead into the future and see possible windows that they could use for their prescribed burn.
as we move towards the fall of the year. Of course, it's time when weaning will take place. We want to also remember that at weaning time is when we have to make some decisions about which cows to cull each fall. And it's a tough decision that ranchers have to make every year. A good place to start, of course, is the age of the cow. We really probably want to start looking at these cows carefully at age 8 and see if there's any other reason we might want to cull them. Certainly once we get to age 10, we may want to check the mouth to make sure that it's still sound. She has sound teeth and can continue to consume forages so that she can maintain body condition throughout the winter. Once she reaches age 12, on the average, I would think that's a pretty good time that we may want to consider pretty diligently culling those very, very old cows. Other things to consider as we're watching these cows as they come through the chute this fall when we're weaning their calf, such things as eye health. Take a look closely at both eyes to make sure that there are no tumors that are growing on the eye itself. Those can, if left unchecked, can go ahead and become cancerous and be a real problem. Check the feet and legs. If we have a cow that's showing severe signs of lameness, then we need to understand why. If she's stifled, has real injury, and especially one of those hind legs, chances are it's not going to get better, and she's just going to go downhill in body condition. Good time to get her culled is while she's still in good shape coming off summer grass, and not try to keep her around throughout the course of the winter. Other things to consider are body condition of these cows. If we have some of these older cows that it's time for them to go, culling them at the time of the year, say into the early fall months when they're still maintaining body condition from summer, really is helpful, because those very, very thin cows that we market later on will not only weigh less, but they'll bring less per pound, because the buyers know that very, very thin cows have a low dressing percent and they're more prone to bruising than our cows that are in better body condition. Of course, if we've got one of those really wild, crazy cows that can cause us some problems as we're working them, cause some damage to our equipment, then why keep them around? They're a danger to us. They don't really help the entire beef industry. This would be a good year to go ahead and cull her and not keep a heifer from her, just because that seems to be a kind of a heritable trait. And finally, as we go through the fall, if we haven't preg checked these cows, this would be a good time to visit with your local veterinarian and schedule a time to get those cows' pregnancy checked. Why not find out which of these cows did not get bred during the last breeding season? Market them now while they're in good body condition to bring the best price you can as a cull cow. Keep these things in mind as you look at the cows this fall as they go through the chute at weaning time, and see if we can make some real sound decisions at the right time for proper cow culling for your herd this year. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
It's been a few weeks since a large fire at the Tyson processing plant in Kansas, and Darrell, that's actually still impacting the markets.
Oh yeah, we're still seeing market. In fact, we're really just being able to assess the impacts now. Slaughter data comes, the actual slaughter data comes with a couple-week lag, so it was only in the last week or so that we got the data for the week after the fire. And if you look at those patterns, you know, for the Monday through Friday, immediately after the fire, the slaughter, steer and heifer slaughter was down just about the estimated capacity of that plant. I think it was down 4.6% for Monday through Friday. But by a week later, the industry was able to put together a large Saturday kill, which offset most of that. Price shocks have been pretty dramatic. Has a lot of folks concerned a little bit, but really it's the market doing what the market does. So box beef prices shot up immediately. They've come back down pretty well, and it looks like many of those impacts are there. We're still working through the impacts on feeder and fed cattle markets. And of course, USDA is actually going to investigate to make sure there were no improprieties as a result of all of this.
Cattle producers are thinking corn right now. They need feed for the winter. How's corn impacting feed prices?
Well, there's you know, a lot of uncertainty, like a lot of other factors affecting cattle markets. Corn markets are uncertain right now. We really don't have a good handle yet on acreage, and even more questions about yield at this point. And so there's a lot of diversity out there. USDA's official estimates right now are for a significantly larger corn crop than I think most analysts would agree with at this point. If USDA is right, and it could happen, then prices for corn won't change a whole lot this year from last year. On the other hand, we've got a lot of late corn out there. It's very immature. And if we get, even a regular frost or certainly an early frost, that's going to have a bigger impact on yield. So there's risk in this market to the upside. That would affect feedlot cost of gain, so that would impact them. And if that happens, then it will have impacts on feeder cattle markets as well. So everybody's keeping an eye on this thing right now. It's still quite uncertain.
Last fall and winter, we had really great wheat pasture across the state, where a lot of producers are starting to put the wheat in the ground right now. Is there a potential for a good wheat pasture crop again this year?
Actually looks very good right now. Most of the state has had some rain over the last 2 weeks, certainly over the last month. There are a few spots that have kind of missed out, but by and large, moisture conditions are good, soil temperature conditions are good. I've done a few sort of tentative budgets, and it looks like a sort of an average year, I guess I would say at this point. Part of the problem, of course, is that feeder cattle futures, if you use them as an estimate of where we're going to be able to sell cattle next spring, those are still depressed. They're still actually impacted by the fire impacts, and we've not recovered really from that in those futures markets. So it's kind of a break-even proposition at this point, I think. It depends a little bit on whether it's your wheat or whether you're renting wheat from somebody else in terms of the way the cash flow works out. So it's going to require a little bit of penciling. It looks like a sort of a decent year, but not really an outstanding year at this point in time.
Okay, thank you very much. Darryl Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
You might be surprised to find out that if it weren't for Napoleon, we might not have canned foods today. In 1800, during the Napoleonic Wars, the French government was looking for a new, inexpensive, and effective method for preserving large amounts of food. In 1806, a new preservation method would come from Nicolas Appert, a French chef who today is credited with inventing modern canning, or at least is considered to be responsible for developing the basis of modern canning. The technique that he used was to place food into specially designed glass containers, which were then sealed and placed into canvas bags. Glass containers would continue to be used until 1810, when Peter Durand patented the use of what were called tin plate canisters in Britain. While these containers would have roughly resembled the cans that we know today, they were definitely not identical. They were large, bulky, and sealed with lead solder, and had to be opened with a hammer and chisel or smashed open with a rock. It wouldn't be until 1855 that the first can opener would be patented, while in the United States, the first can opener would be patented by Erzur Warner in 1858. However, there wasn't a major demand for canned foods in the United States until the Civil War in 1861. So whether it's a glass jar, a steel can, or a foil pouch, we owe it all to Napoleon and Nicolas Appert. For more information, please visit sunup.okstate.edu or fapc.biz.
Finally today, into the show ring at the Tulsa County Fair.
We're having our Tulsa County Livestock Show. We're showing cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs today. This is kind of their first stop, to get to Tulsa State Fair. It's a good time to get out and just get their animals in the show ring, kind of work out any kinks that they need to fix before Tulsa State Fair.
I've shown for, I think, sheep it'll be 4 years, 5 years. And I've only lost it one time, but it's something like you always think about, like you think you're prepared, but something could go wrong if they could jump up and you lose them. So just nerves. When you show sheep, you don't show them with a halter. You just walk them in with your hand. So if they get out of control or something and your hand slips, they're gone.
This is Gloria Faith Lamb. She is my oldest and my biggest lamb this year. You have to get their connection. That's pretty hard to do when you have two, because they trust each other, but when you get one, they can just trust you. I like playing with livestock. I was raised around livestock. I love animals.
It just teaches them to have responsibility for something other than themselves. They have to feed, they have to exercise, they have to take care of the animal daily if they want to do well, but also it just gives them a good work ethic. I mean, we always say shows are won at home and not in the ring. Both of my boys were in 4-H and FFA, and I just feel like it gave them a tremendous work ethic above their peers that maybe didn't show livestock, because they had that responsibility. They knew that if they didn't put the work in, they weren't going to get anything out of it.
So I have an older sister. When she became a freshman, she started showing hogs. So I kind of wanted to do what big sister was doing, and I've just been stuck with it ever since. Kind of like a family thing. So my family's really into it, and we're all really close with it. So it's just a lot of fun at that you can be as a family and do something. I think it's kind of cool to see the relationships with people, because I mean, you build, like even just in Tulsa County, there's so many friends from other chapters that you become close with because you all feel the same way about it. You know how much work you put into it, and you know how many late hours you stayed on a school night when you had homework and just putting in all the effort. I think it really pays off in the show ring when you do good. You kind of see that you were tired, but you pushed through it and it came out on top.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. From the Tulsa County Fair, I'm Lyndall Stout. Remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.